31 Hotel, runway 21, clear for takeoff. Wind 160 at 12.
Clear for takeoff, runway 21, November 1931 Hotel.
Hey guys, welcome to Foxtrot Live Lessons. This is going to be one of many videos I will be making as a part of this new series. And my motivation behind this series is to spread the word of aviation around to the pilot community and to those who are even outside this community who may want to start flying one day. And I want to start making these lesson videos to be another reference to people who may have questions about these various aviation topics that are frankly quite complicated. And so I hope to be a good reference point for you guys, and I hope you guys enjoy this video series. And so I thought to myself, while making this series, what would be a very good first lesson video to make? And I'm launching this series in the middle of February, and so I thought to myself, why not start out with aircraft icing? It's the middle of winter, and in the United States, aircraft icing is prominent, especially with the colder temperatures in the atmosphere and with the winter storms that blow through on a regular basis here. And so with that said, my first lesson today is going to be about aircraft icing. In this aircraft icing lesson video, we're going to talk about what aircraft icing is, where icing can occur, the types of ice that can form on your airplane during flight, the dangers of aircraft icing to flight, and how it can be prevented. And so I'll start out with the definition for aircraft icing, and what aircraft icing is when you have super cold water droplets freeze on impact with any external surface of the plane during flight. And so you may ask, what is a super cold water droplet? And basically what a super cold water droplet is you have water up at altitude that's still in a liquid form, even though the temperature in the atmosphere is below freezing. And the reason why the water is still liquid is because the super cold water has a lack of ability to complete the nucleation process, which is how water freezes. And two of the factors influencing the freezing of super cold droplets are the presence of freezing nuclei. Typically, those are ice crystals up in the atmosphere. And the second factor is latent heat, which is released when water freezes, which is talked about in thermodynamics. But we're not going to get into that too much today. We'll just stick to the point. But anyway, when super cold water hits that wing, or hits that airfoil, or any airfoil on your aircraft, icing is generally going to occur because the metal and the material on your airplane is at that temperature where the water hits that surface and it just instantly starts to freeze on your airplane. So now that we talked about super cold water droplets, let's now talk about when and where icing conditions occur and where you might see these super cold water droplets. So there are two requirements for icing conditions to occur. And the first requirement is that there must be visible moisture in the area, such as clouds or precipitation. And the second requirement to icing is that there also must be a temperature that is ranging from freezing, which is at 0 degrees Celsius, to minus 20 degrees Celsius. Now, you won't see icing conditions below minus 20 degrees Celsius because it's so cold that the super cold droplets won't exist, as they are already crystallized into ice because it's so cold up there beyond the temperature of minus 20 degrees below 0 centigrade. Now, the different types of ice vary. There are 3 different types of ice that you may encounter if you are flying. And the first type of ice that we're going to talk about is rime ice. And rime ice is formed when you have small super cool water droplets freeze on contact with the surface within sub-zero centigrade conditions. It has a rough crystalline-like shape to it. It's kind of spiky, kind of sporadically shaped. It's very, very obvious, and this particular kind of ice will disrupt airflow over an airfoil like no tomorrow because of its erratic shape. It's just that type of ice that will really start disrupting things in flight and causing problems. Now, in terms of the temperature when rime ice is formed, it typically forms when the temperature is about 15 degrees below 0 Celsius to minus 20 degrees below 0 Celsius. The next type of ice we'll talk about is clear ice. Now, clear ice is the most dangerous form of icing. The reason why it's so dangerous is that it's really glossy, heavy, and very difficult to see. And it's very difficult to see because it just kind of creeps up on you. It doesn't instantly freeze like rime ice. And clear ice forms when you have larger supercold drops that start contacting the surface of your airplane, and it just starts running around and just running through as you keep going through the air, and it just starts, running along your airfoil, and then eventually, as time goes on, it will start to freeze and start forming a very glossy sort of film. Now, the temperature for clear ice typically ranges from 2 degrees Celsius to negative 10 degrees Celsius. And like I just said, it's definitely very difficult to detect and therefore the most dangerous kind of ice to encounter in flight. Now, the last type of ice we'll go over is mixed ice. And mixed ice is basically the combination of clear and rime ice. And you're going to see this ice kind of right in the middle of the temperature range, minus 10 degrees Celsius to minus 15 degrees Celsius. It's sort of that in-between sort of ice that you see. It's a combination of the two. And mixed ice is no better than rime or clear ice. In fact, none of these types of icing conditions are very favorable at all for flight. So moving on from the different types of ice that can form in flight, we're now going to talk about why aircraft icing is so dangerous. Aircraft icing is something that pilots should consider every time before they fly while obtaining a weather briefing. And you do this by making sure that there's no icing airmets or sigmets on your route of flight. And we're going to talk about airmets and sigmets on a separate lesson video. And just a disclaimer to all you pilots out there, always get a weather briefing every time before you fly. It's the law, and it's a smart thing to do to make sure that your flight is safe. And so the reason why icing is so dangerous is that it can quickly destroy that smooth flow of air over your airfoil, such as your wings, propeller, elevator, you name it. So consequently, there's a significant increase in drag as a result of the ice accumulation on your airfoil, to the point where the pilot's going to have to increase power and pitch up to compensate and maintain altitude. And because of this correction, the angle of attack is increased, which is exposing other surfaces of the plane to icing, making the situation worse. Also, the plane will stall at much higher airspeeds as a result of the increased drag and the higher angle of attack needed to compensate. And so the plane is going to stall at lower angles of attack and higher airspeeds, especially when ice starts to accumulate. So just a slight pitch up correction that the pilot makes could induce a stall if the icing is severe enough. And the worst case scenario is that you could get into a situation where the plane will become uncontrollable and you'll go into a pitch and roll, and a recovery from such a condition is close to impossible because of the severe disruption of smooth airflow over your airfoil surfaces. Remember that icing can occur on any exposed surface of the plane. It can cause additional hazards. It's not just limited to the wings or other airfoils like your tail, your elevator, your wings, etc. You can also accumulate ice on your landing gear. You can accumulate it on your pitot-static port, which is another bad thing to occur, and even your antennas are exposed to icing. Pretty much everything on your airplane is exposed to icing, and it can cause additional hazards. The last topic we're going to talk about today is how to prevent aircraft icing. Now, the surefire way to prevent aircraft icing is to avoid altitudes where the temperature is below freezing and where there is no visible moisture. Unfortunately, that's not always realistic, especially if you're flying IFR. Avoiding icing conditions takes planning, and that starts with the pre-flight stage and ends all the way down to the post-flight phase. Things like fuel load, weight and balance, departure, en route and arrival routes, and cruise altitude planning must be considered during pre-flight. Even though a proper pre-flight has been done, things happen, and a pilot must be prepared. If icing is encountered, it's important to decide whether to climb or descend below the icing conditions depending on what the temperature is and where the cloud layers are along your route. It's also extremely critical to keep in contact with ATC and even flight service, as they are there to help. While most light GA planes don't have much in the way of de-icing or anti-icing technology, many of the new and larger airplanes do. The point of de-icing technology is to give the pilot more time to escape an inadvertent icing encounter. These systems are not designed for prolonged exposure to ice. It is meant as a means to escape it. So there are two categories of remedies to alleviate icing. there's anti-ice technology and de-ice technology equipment. Anti-ice equipment such as pitot heaters, carburetor heaters, and other such heating devices are used before a flight to prevent icing, while de-icing equipment like de-ice boots, which works via a bleed air pneumatic system, and heated wings are used to get rid of ice that has already accumulated. These systems are used in combination or individually based off the needs of that flight that day. The key thing to remember is that anti-icing equipment is used to prevent icing, while de-icing equipment is used to alleviate ice that has already built up. And that is the biggest point I want to make here with this part of the lesson. And so with that said, the combination of having the knowledge about aircraft icing and having the proper planning and de-icing and anti-icing technology is what's going to keep us all safe in the air through icing conditions. And these conditions are some of the harshest conditions that a pilot can encounter. And so with that said, that's all for this mini lesson. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys next time.